Nostradamus saw it coming. 3 countries facing their doom by the end of 2025. Predictions for 2025. A silent ripple moves through Timor, loud, not sudden, but steady like fate, breathing beneath our daily noise. While we scroll and swipe, somewhere in the dust of forgotten prophecies, a warning waits. Nostradamus, the mystic whose visions pierced through centuries, once scribbled signs of 3 nations quietly unraveling by the close of 2025. Not through war or fire, but through quiet cracks in their foundations, the kind we rarely see until it's too late. You might live in one. You might already feel the shift in your newsfeed, in your weather, in your streets. These aren't just predictions. They're reflections of a world out of balance. So before we open the scrolls the future tried to burn. Like this video if you've ever felt the ground shifting beneath modern life. Share it with someone who believes wisdom is stronger than fear. Subscribe to The Journey of Wisdom, where ancient insight meets today's tangled world. And if you're ready to go deeper, walk with us. The veil is thin. Let's begin. Number 1. Introduction to Nostradamus and Prophecy. Throughout history, few names have stirred as much intrigue and speculation as Michel de Nostradamus, known to most as Nostradamus. This 16th century physician and mystic left behind more than just cryptic verses. He carved a legacy that has continued to echo through the corridors of time. His book, Les Prophéties, includes over 900 4-line poems, or quatrains, that many believe contain glimpses into future events. While skeptics dismiss them as nothing more than vague poetry, others have found them eerily precise, especially when patterns appear to match real-world disasters, wars, or political shifts. But buried beneath the more famous predictions lies a lesser-known quatrain never officially recorded in his published works that emerged only in 1994, discovered tucked inside a dusty European manuscript sold quietly at a Paris auction. This verse paints a haunting image. 3 pillars once proud, who by fire, flood and fault shall crumble before the rise of the double sun. It's a line that has puzzled scholars for decades, but in today's global landscape, the mystery begins to take shape with unsettling clarity. The 3 pillars mentioned in this prophetic stanza are now being linked by modern interpreters to 3 powerful countries that once shaped world affairs with unshakable confidence. Today, however, their strength seems more fragile than ever. Political instability, economic turmoil, environmental disasters, and deep cultural divides are shaking the foundations of what were once considered global giants. From rising sea levels and wildfires to internal conflict and technological disruption, it's no longer far-fetched to believe that great nations, like towering structures weakened over time, could face collapse not overnight, but through steady erosion of trust, unity, and resilience. And what of the double sun? Some believe it symbolizes a dramatic cosmic event, while others interpret it metaphorically, perhaps the rise of a new world order, or the dual forces of crisis and awakening that we see accelerating in our time. What makes this more than just a historical curiosity is its mirror to our modern world. We are all living through times of immense uncertainty, financial pressures, extreme weather, digital surveillance, and rapid shifts in global power. Whether or not you believe in prophecy, the real wisdom lies not in predicting doom, but in preparing our minds and hearts. When society feels unstable, many people grasp for certainty or control, but instead of fearing collapse, we might consider what inner structures we've built within ourselves. Are we nurturing resilience, empathy, and clarity, or are we reacting to fear and chaos with more division? N.B. Nostradamus may have seen warning signs in the skies, but today the signals are in plain sight. Perhaps his true gift was not foresight, but prompting us to look deeper, ask questions, and face the uncomfortable truths that shape our world. As we move forward, let us do so with eyes open not to panic, but to awaken to the responsibility we share in shaping what rises after the fall. Number 2. The three pillars, nations, and their predicted collapse. The first pillar, the United States of America. Let's take a closer look at what Nostradamus might have meant when he wrote, "In the land of eagle's cry, twin flames rise and vanish in dusk. The house divided shall fall as kings whisper in foreign tongues." Many believe this cryptic message points directly to the United States, a nation long symbolized by the eagle, a country whose foundations once stood firm, now showing signs of fatigue. The twin flames evoke haunting memories of September 11th, when the Twin Towers fell, and with them, a powerful illusion of invulnerability. That event didn't just mark a national tragedy, it cracked something deeper, perhaps even spiritual. The line, "A house divided shall fall," echoes a warning Abraham Lincoln gave during America's darkest hour of internal strife. Now, more than a century later, Nostradamus's words seem to resurface with chilling relevance as we inch closer to 2025. So ask yourself this: is the division within the United States today still symbolic, or has it become a tangible fracture we can see, feel, and fear? The rift is no longer about policy disagreements or opposing views. It's digital, it's emotional, it's ideological. Red versus blue has turned into truth versus perception, unity versus tribalism. When each side starts viewing the other not just as wrong, but as dangerous, what's left to hold a nation together? And then comes the line, "Kings whisper in foreign tongues." Could this allude to rising fears of foreign interference in our democratic process through hacking, through disinformation, or even quiet influence in the corridors of power? As technology grows more powerful, so do the unseen hands that can tip the scales of public opinion and national decision-making. And while society fractures, nature seems to echo that instability. Think about the natural disasters we've seen: wildfires ripping through states, hurricanes leaving cities underwater, heat waves so intense they buckle roads, droughts forcing communities to relocate. When Nostradamus spoke of a fault breaking apart the land, was he only being poetic, or could he have glimpsed an actual seismic event? Geologists have warned about the New Madrid fault line and the Cascadia subduction zone areas that, if they rupture, could redefine the American landscape in ways we've only seen in apocalyptic fiction. Could nature itself be responding to the imbalance, the disharmony we've created? As the United States continues to face internal polarization, external manipulation, and environmental instability, we must ask not just what Nostradamus saw, but what we choose to see. Is the first pillar already cracking beneath our feet, not with a bang, but with a slow, ghostly shudder that we've grown too distracted to notice? And more importantly, what can we do now, as individuals, as communities, to reinforce what still stands? Here lies the deeper lesson. Prophecies are not always about fate, they're about warning. They're a mirror, not a script. Perhaps the question isn't, is this happening? But what will we do if it is? Let this be a wake-up call to seek understanding over division, action over apathy, and compassion over chaos. What are your thoughts? Do you see the tremors? And if so, what might help us heal before the cracks become unfixable? Let's talk about it. The second pillar, Turkey. Let's turn now to the second pillar in Nostradamus's eerie vision, Turkey, a nation symbolized in his cryptic lines as "The crescent shifts, draped in black veil, blood in the streets of the oldest city. The east shall shake, and from within the lion devours its own." When you read that, what comes to mind? For many scholars and interpreters, These words paint a haunting picture of a country at the crossroads, literally and metaphorically. Turkey, long standing as a bridge between East and West, between Europe and Asia, between ancient legacy and modern ambition, is more than just a piece on the geopolitical chessboard. It is a cultural and historical heartbeat of civilizations. The crescent clearly references the symbol of the Turkish flag, deeply tied to Islamic identity, while draped in black veil carries the heavy symbolism of mourning, sorrow, and a sense of national loss. When a country wrapped in such a powerful legacy is predicted to bleed, it's not just about one city or one crisis. It speaks to something deeper unraveling from within. Now consider Istanbul, often called the oldest city, a place where empires have risen and fallen, where the echoes of Byzantium and Ottoman glory still hum beneath cobblestone streets. But beneath the beauty and history lies tension, political unrest, economic instability. Crackdowns on freedom of speech and the silencing of dissent have darkened the democratic landscape. The lion devours its own. What an image! Could this refer to the internal purges we've seen in recent years? Journalists jailed, military officials ousted, opposition voices muted. And if so, what does it say about the soul of a nation that turns inward in fear rather than strength? A Buddhist proverb reminds us, "A man is not called wise because he talks and talks again, but if he is peaceful, loving and fearless, then he is in truth called wise." Where do these values live in Turkey's current path? But the prophecy doesn't end with politics, it moves to the very earth itself. Turkey sits atop the North Anatolian Fault, one of the most dangerous seismic zones on the planet. Scientists have warned time and again, a major earthquake is overdue. When the prophecy says, "The East shall shake," it may not be metaphor, it may be a literal warning, a physical tremor that could devastate lives, homes, and history in an instant. Add to this the collapse of Turkey's currency, inflation that erodes everyday livelihoods, and the shifting allegiances in a volatile region where friends and enemies change masks quickly, and you start to see how the pieces of this prophecy could fall into place. It's not just a warning anymore, it feels like a countdown. So, here's the question I ask you. Are we watching the unraveling of Turkey not from the outside, but from its very heart? What does it mean when a nation built on resilience begins to fracture not only in politics, but in economy, identity, and even the land beneath its feet? As we look toward the end of 2025, is Turkey approaching a redefinition not of conquest and grandeur, but of grief and reckoning? The Dhammapada says, "From anger, greed, and delusion, destruction arises. From love, clarity, and mindfulness, a nation is restored." Which of these paths will Turkey choose? This isn't just about prophecy, it's about awareness. These warnings from Nostradamus, when stripped of drama, invite us to look deeper into patterns of human behavior and national identity. And the real question isn't whether we believe the future is doomed, but whether we are willing to learn from the signs, reflect on the direction we're heading, and maybe, just maybe, change course before the veils of mourning fall. What do you think? Are we witnessing the shifting of the second pillar right before our eyes? And if so, what responsibility do we hold as observers, as fellow humans, to care, to understand, and perhaps even to speak out before it's too late? If you've made it this far, you're already one step ahead in uncovering the hidden truths of what 2025 might hold. Comment below with Future Watcher to show you're ready to face what's coming with open eyes and a sharp mind. Don't go anywhere. There's still more to reveal about the fate of these three nations. Stay till the end and discover the predictions that could change how you see the world. The third pillar, China. Let's take a closer look at the third pillar in Nostradamus's haunting vision. China described in striking words, "The mirror cracks in the land of silk. Dragon's breath scorches its kin. The red tide rises but finds no shore to call its own. These lines may sound poetic at first, but when you start to unpack their meaning in today's context, they become deeply unsettling. The land of silk clearly points to China, a country with a rich history that has for centuries stood as a symbol of elegance, tradition, and power. But when Nostradamus speaks of a mirror cracking, what comes to mind is not just literal damage. It speaks of illusion breaking, of an image long held starting to fall apart. China has projected itself as a unified, rapidly rising global superpower. But behind that polished image are cracks growing wider each year. A major concern is the demographic crisis. China's population is aging rapidly, birth rates are falling, and younger generations face a future with fewer opportunities. When a nation becomes top-heavy in age without a strong youth base to support its future, it becomes vulnerable, not just economically, but socially. These shifts aren't theories anymore. They're happening. Empty skyscrapers and whole cities built without residents now cast eerie silhouettes in the distant coast towns that stand as monuments to over-ambition, reflecting an economy that built too fast and too blindly. This growing fragility leads us into the next line. Dragon's breath scorches its kin. This may sound mythological, but it feels painfully real when you think about increasing domestic repression. Technology has enabled surveillance on a level we've never seen before, where facial recognition and social scoring systems create a society always watched, always judged. Dissent is not just discouraged, it is crushed. From the handling of protests in Hong Kong to the treatment of minority groups, from censorship of media to control over information, the fire doesn't come from enemies, it comes from within. What happens when a government turns its immense power inward to maintain control? The people begin to feel it in every breath they take, every word they hesitate to say. And yet, that control may be slipping. With youth unemployment soaring and a generation questioning their place in a rigid system, social tension simmers beneath the surface, and history has taught us that such tension rarely stays quiet forever. Then there's the third line. The red tide rises, but finds no shore to call its own. This speaks to China's increasing ambition on the world, stage military expansion in contested seas, rising influence in developing nations, and strong rhetoric about Taiwan. But the warning here is clear. Expansion without limits often leads to isolation. The more China reaches out with force or control, the more it may find itself pushing allies away or creating resistance instead of influence. What if 2025 isn't the year of triumph, but of reckoning? What if the dragon, instead of conquering outward, finds itself caught in its own fire? And this brings us to a deeply human moment, because whether you live in China or far beyond its borders, the lesson here resonates. No matter how powerful we become, if we ignore the well-being of our own people, silence dissenting voices, or push expansion at the cost of balance, we will eventually feel the consequences. Perhaps Nostradamus wasn't warning of doom to frighten us, but to remind us that unchecked ambition, control without compassion, and isolation masked as pride are paths that lead to collapse, not glory. So, as you reflect on China's place in this unfolding prophecy, ask yourself, what does it mean for a nation to truly thrive? And in our own lives, are we building foundations that include empathy, balance, and connection? Are we burning bridges under the illusion of strength? Number 3. A triangle of influence and entropy. America, Turkey, and China, 3 nations that seem vastly different in culture, history, and ideology form what can be seen as a symbolic triangle of global influence, each holding a unique form of power that shapes the world stage. The United States has long projected military dominance and cultural reach, deeply rooted in its role as a modern empire built on innovation and media. Turkey, straddling Europe and Asia, sits at the spiritual and geopolitical crossroads of East and West, embodying centuries of religious tension, imperial legacy, and modern political complexity. China, the rising titan, dominates in economic power and demographic strength, casting a long shadow across trade, technology, and ideology. Yet beneath their commanding presence, a quieter, more dangerous shift may be unfolding, one that Nostradamus, centuries ago, may have sensed in his cryptic verses. Rather than a single, explosive collapse, Nostradamus suggested something more subtle and corrosive: an erosion from within. This entropy isn't driven solely by weapons or invasions, but by the internal contradictions that these nations can no longer reconcile. In the United States, the widening chasm between political tribes, the erosion of trust in institutions, and the struggles with identity and truth-telling shake the very core of its democratic ideals. Meanwhile, Turkey balances on a tightrope between secularism and religious nationalism, contending with economic uncertainty and growing authoritarianism. China, though commanding in its global expansion, must confront deepening economic disparity, demographic challenges from an aging population, and rising internal dissent, all while trying to sustain an image of unity and control. When we look deeper, what becomes even more unsettling is the potential interconnectedness of their trajectories. A major financial disruption in the United States, from over-leveraged debt or political paralysis, could send shockwaves through China's export-reliant economy. Conversely, a slowdown in Chinese growth or a geopolitical misstep in the Taiwan Strait could destabilize global supply chains, affect inflation in the West, and trigger further economic instability. If Turkey, as a key NATO member and regional influencer, spirals into internal chaos or conflict, it could reignite instability across Europe and the Middle East, drawing in allies and adversaries alike. The question then is not just whether each nation can withstand its own inner turmoil, but whether any of them can survive the ripple effects of each other's unraveling. This systemic fragility, the web of consequence and codependencies, likely what Nostradamus hinted at, not the end of a single empire, but the crumbling of a framework we've long accepted as the global order. And perhaps more than predicting doom, his verses serve as a warning that power without harmony, wealth without wisdom, and pride without humility will ultimately devour itself. In our modern lives, this reflection holds valuable insight. Whether as individuals, communities, or nations, we are only as strong as the values we hold and the unity we nurture. As we observe political shifts, economic tremors, and social unrest around the globe, we must ask ourselves, are we moving toward greater connection or deeper division? Now more than ever, we must cultivate awareness not just of global headlines, but of the emotional and ethical currents underneath them. Empires rise and fall, but the choices we make every day to act with compassion, to seek truth, to prioritize well-being over dominance determine whether we perpetuate collapse or contribute to renewal. Nostradamus may have seen entropy, but we still hold the power of response. In this time of uncertainty, let us not be paralyzed by fear, but grounded by wisdom. The world may tremble, but the soul that remains mindful, kind, and resilient will always find a way forward. Number 4. The Double Sunday and Fourth Nation Future Reveal. The Double Sunday and the Fourth Naciones are phrases that might sound poetic at first, but within Nostradamus's mysterious verses, they could point to something far more profound. The double sun has puzzled scholars for centuries. Some say it represents a cosmic event, like a binary star. Others believe it symbolizes two competing powers or dual leadership. But what if it means something entirely different, a new light rising in the world, a shift in human consciousness, or the birth of a new way of living forged from the downfall of old systems? Nostradamus never spelled things out plainly. Instead, he wrapped truth in symbols, perhaps to challenge us to look beyond the obvious. Then there's the haunting reference to a fourth Nationon that doesn't stand tall like the others, but whose fall or transformation may signal the closing chapter of this era. Could it be a country overlooked by global powers, or maybe one whose quiet influence holds more weight than we realize? He left behind images: a mountain split in two, a lion without a roar, a frozen crown melting into the sea. These are not just poetic lines, they're clues waiting for those who dare to read between them. Have you ever wondered if there's more happening beneath the surface of world events than what we're told? Could these symbols be describing a cultural collapse, a monarchy crumbling, or a voice of strength losing its power? But here's the truth Nostradamus may have been pointing us toward, and it's the part many overlook. Prophecy is not destiny. That's a powerful reminder. Warnings aren't punishments, they're gifts. They're like signs on the road urging us to slow down, to think, to wake up before it's too late. If the world truly is shifting, if nations are teetering on the edge of change, then the bigger question isn't what will fall, but what will rise in its place. And here's where you come in. What kind of future do you believe in? Do you think we're locked into a cycle of collapse? Or is there still room for growth, for wisdom, for transformation? The future isn't something that just happens to use. It's shaped by the choices we make right now. That's why your voice matters. So ask yourself, are you sleepwalking through this time of change, or are you awake enough to shape it? That's the question Nostradamus leaves hanging in the air, and it's the question we must all answer. So as we stand in this uncertain present, looking toward a future full of shadows and signs, remember this: time doesn't wait, and history doesn't ask permission. But wisdom listens, reflects, and acts with courage. Let's not be mere observers of prophecy, let's be participants in a better ending. Because even in the face of predictions, there's one truth we must hold on to. The future isn't written in stone, it's written in the hearts and hands of those who are willing to change. The signs are clear, and now you've seen them too. Type Eyes Open 2025 in the comments if you're ready to stay informed and aware in a time of uncertainty. Stick around until the end. What's revealed next might be the key to understanding the world's turning point in 2025. Reflection and guidance. What does the fall of the great pillars teach us? After journeying through the haunting foresight of Nostradamus's cryptic warnings about a divided America, a fractured Turkey, and a tightening China, we are left not just with headlines or historic curiosity, but with a deep stirring within. We're left wondering, what does it all truly mean for everyday people like us, those not sitting in seats of power, but trying to raise families, find peace, and live wisely in a world that seems to shift beneath our feet? The answer is not in fear or fascination, but in reflection. For prophecy, in its deepest sense, is not about knowing the future as much as it is about seeing clearly the present. It is a mirror, not a roadmap, and in it we must ask ourselves not what will happen, but what are we becoming? Like the Buddha once said, what we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Our life is the creation of our mind. Empires do not fall in a day, just as relationships, communities, or even personal peace do not vanish overnight. The collapse begins quietly, with pride that drowns humility, with indifference that replaces empathy, with division where unity once stood strong. A nation crumbles not only because its leaders fail, but because its people turn away from truth, from each other, and from their own inner compass. And in this way, the fall of great countries becomes a metaphor for our own inner erosion. We see a pattern. When we stop listening, when outrage replaces dialogue, when fear is fed more than understanding, Then, whether it's a country or a person, the foundation begins to crack. Lao Tzu once warned, "If you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading." In this, there is both a caution and an invitation to change course before the cliff's edge arrives. So what can we truly do? The answer begins not in large revolutions, but in small, sacred choices. The Buddha taught, "A disciplined mind brings happiness." This is where it starts with the inner nation. When the outer world feels unstable, we must go inward and anchor ourselves. The strength of any society is built on the character of its people. So, we cultivate compassion, not just in quiet thoughts, but in real, daily action. Hold space for another person's story. Choose patience over pride. Speak truth, but let it be wrapped in kindness. In a time where harsh voices dominate, we become gentle warriors of clarity and care. For the world does not need more noise, it needs more hearts awake. And it is in awakening that true change begins. As Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The most precious gift we can offer others is our presence." And while the world churns with distractions and polarizing noise, staying awake becomes a spiritual act. Do not numb yourself with screens, scrolling endlessly while life and truth pass silently by. Awareness is your shield against manipulation, against fear, against the temptation to disengage. Ask questions, read deeply, listen widely, understand before you react. For many of the great declines in history began not with enemies at the gates, but with silence from within. Confucius once said, "Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance." That humility can protect us more than any armor. We must also embrace the wisdom of impermanence. Power, like all things, rises and falls. Empires pass, leaders change, even sorrow and struggle evolve. Nothing stays fixed, not the joy, not the pain. This is not a cause for despair, but a call to wisdom. If the United States, China, or Turkey tremble under their own weight, so too do our personal struggles. Everything turns on the wheel. So, instead of clinging to the illusion of control or sinking into panic, we prepare with balance, with equanimity. We do not resist the tide, we learn to float with grace. The Dhammapada reminds us, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. And finally, we heal. We mend what we can. Whether in our homes, workplaces, friendships, or even the quiet corners of the internet, we become agents of restoration. It may feel like a small drop in an endless ocean, but enough drops change the tide. Choose connection over criticism, kindness over cleverness, generosity over judgment. History, in the end, is not only shaped by kings and wars, but by quiet acts of courage performed by ordinary people. As the Dalai Lama said, "If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito." So, if you feel the world shifting, if you sense something deeper beneath the headlines and turmoil, honor that awareness. But don't freeze, don't despair, participate. The future is not set in stone or starlight, it's etched moment by moment in how we choose to live, speak, and love today. And maybe the most important question we can ask ourselves is, what kind of pillar am I becoming? Am I rooted in wisdom, compassion, and truth, or do I bend with every fear and fracture? Because no matter what the old seers said, the power to shape the coming years still lies within us. You still have a choice. So will you rise to it, or wait for others to write the ending for you? And so, as we close this chapter, remember this. Prophecy is not, fatates, a mirror. Whether it's America trembling under division, Turkey caught between legacy and loss, or China tightening its grip only to feel it slipping, what matters most is not what Nostradamus may have seen, but what we choose to see now. The signs around us are not only warnings, they are invitations. Invitations to wake up, to care more deeply, to live more mindfully. Because in the end, The collapse of nations often begins where compassion ends, and the rise of a better future, that begins with you-sown thought, one action, one choice at a time. If this video stirred something in you, if it made you reflect, question, or simply feel, then let's keep that conversation alive. Like this video to show your support, share it with someone you think needs to hear this message, and subscribe to The Journey of Wisdom for more thoughtful explorations into the unseen truths shaping our world. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next, because in times like these, awareness isn't just power, it's peace. Until next time, stay mindful, stay kind, and walk with wisdom.